Yeah, and we have the rights to the U.S. Well, actually, Seville has the rights to sell.
Well, yeah, that's something we could talk about just in terms of how we structured that.
Yeah.
Another time if you guys want.
I wouldn't mind sort of going some of the telephone side of things, going back to the Halifax, Toronto aspect of it, and then the national, regional stuff. And for sure, in Halifax, we recognize that number one, we needed a producer with a track record, which you guys had, and Chaz didn't, and that sort of definitely drove the system. Also, we were at a point of decision making, we still are, where investments over $1 million require a national decision, and that sort of, again, sort of made it, didn't make any difference where the producer was actually located. I mean, the decision was being made on the film, the potential of the film, and the strength of the team making it. I think the other thing that did cause some concerns, though, for you in the financing was how you split between Nova Scotia and Ontario with regard to tax credits.
Exactly.
An interesting story.
Yeah, because you're always grappling with tax credits in this country because essentially they've now become a part of just about every financing scenario. So you have certain minimums that you need to hit in order to qualify for tax credits in Ontario and in Nova Scotia. Most of the time they kind of work together, but sometimes they don't. We went through, I think, 3 different scenarios where our original scenario was shooting, most of the film and doing some post-production in Nova Scotia. Then we completely changed that model to shooting the film almost entirely in Ontario and doing 3 days in Nova Scotia in order to tap into this new fund that the OMDC had set up. And then we kind of realized that creatively that model was not really going to serve the final film, which was really going to be an execution-specific thing. The spirit of Halifax really needed to be in the movie, so the final model was sort of a balance where we shot pretty much everything except for one day of principal in Ontario, in Hamilton actually, in order to capitalize on the tax credits, and then we shot everything else in Nova Scotia, and the post-production is happening back here in Toronto.
And I got to say, like, that's a very brave kind of decision on your guys' part. Put the authenticity of the story ahead of the economics, because it's pretty compelling arguments in the economics side.
And it's so particular to Halifax. I think that we really needed that, just from the talent pool, to have the right sound for the actors, and also for the locations.
Okay, so let's go back again. It's the fall of 2004. You've come out of the IFP. You're feeling pretty good. You at that point go to Seville and get a deal?
We had a conversation that summer, and I think it was either late in the year or early. Actually, no, it was late in the year because we had put our application into Telefilm in January of 2005. So in order to do that, we needed a letter of commitment from our distributor.
Well, not just a letter of commitment, but you sat with John to develop a marketing plan.
A marketing plan as well. Yeah, we had to do a marketing strategy, and we needed to also figure out what the initial deal would be anyways.
Well, we started, I think, it's sort of a bit hazy now, but we started as just a Canadian distrib.
Yes.
And then I think we sort of moved into foreign after, once we were a little bit further along.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Ralph, what was Telefilm's attitude when these guys came in and said, we're really happy, we got Danny Glover. Oh, by the way, Danny Glover's not a Canadian.
I think, number one, we want to have Canadian films, Canadian stories, talking to Canadian audiences, and all this stuff. But I don't think we want to restrict the creative vision of the directors. We also want to make sure that we can enhance the market value by whatever means we can. It seemed to me that Danny Glover was just a brilliant strategic move. I mean, it's a strong, well-known person in a very strong role within, and pivotal role within the film itself, that take advantage of his ability as an actor and as a charismatic actor, and supported by clearly the Canadian leads, which are all Canadian, Well, in fact, you're a black fighter, Aussie. I mean, a very strategic, well-placed actor. So I think the package was very strong, and it didn't for 1 second erode the Canadian nature of the film.
Let's jump ahead now to the present. At this point, there's the rough cut.
Yep.
And what will be the role? Well, let's ask John actually what his view of what's the distributor's role since a rough cut's now available. What will be your role, if any, in helping to shape the film?
Telephone's been organizing this meeting for the last 2 months.
Just leading up to that question.
John, we have it on videotape.
Well, we have fun with that. Thank you. No, I'm kidding. I think it really depends. Seville, as many filmmakers in Canada know, is a very hands-on creative distributor since we have a filmmaking background. But I think really our job is more, the way we like to work is we like to make sure that the script is where we feel it needs to be and that everyone else is happy with it as well. Everyone's comfortable with it, and obviously that the cast is what we had sort of all hoped for, and that, I think at that point we just sort of step back and let the filmmakers go make their film. And then certainly in the post we have we like to have a say. We like to work, you know, with the director and the editor and the producer, but basically it's only on a comments type basis. We have had cases in the past where we were really concerned that a final cut of a film was actually going to really potentially harm the film commercially, or that we didn't have the strongest film possible based on what we had already seen previously in previous cuts. Because as you all know, a film can change at any time. It can change at the script stage, it can change during production, it can change for the better or for the worse. So really, our job is to again just to make sure that that the filmmakers are putting out the strongest, as far as we're concerned, the filmmakers are putting out the strongest possible film. And that, of course, can be contentious. It can go very well. It all depends. In this case, I think it's going to go very well because we like to see the rushes, and we again, because we have a filmmaking background, we can just tell from the dailies how things are going, what kind of performances they're getting, and pretty much how it's going to cut together. We've worked on some other projects with Ralph out in Atlantic, Canada. And I just also would like to say, you guys, I really appreciate the flexibility between the offices that Telefilm is showing, because I think a lot more films, I've had 2 or 3 productions now that we've been involved with that would not have happened unless there was a flexibility between the offices and a real willingness to get the job done and find money when it was needed. So thanks for that.
Well, since we're giving props to the other thing about Telefilm is that there is a team of people that you're working with, and I don't think you should be afraid to ask questions. On this film, sort of from the get-go, Indira Guha out of the Toronto office, I think Indira is here, and Anne Frank as well, who was our creative analyst. I mean, we're still getting comments from the Toronto team. Yeah, Ralph was on board. These guys know that, but Ralph was probably sitting in the audience during the pitch of this contest.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, and in a way, this film probably would not be here today if it actually wasn't for the kind of support and recognition that's come from Telefilm Canada. So I know sometimes it's a little threatening to sort of deal with Telefilm Canada if you're a new filmmaker that's starting out, but the thing to remember is that they're actually there to kind of support you and your vision. So if you have questions about financing or about story, there are people there that are actually set up to help you. So don't be afraid to call them.
Thank you very much, and your next film is in the bag. Don't worry about that. I think at this point, because of our temporary technical difficulties, we should see if there are any questions, pressing questions from the audience.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I was eager, I'm sorry. Money. I mean, it comes down to money. I mean, Canadian films, they're very expensive to produce, and, it's great to have, like, the stars and the names.